What happens when a man who built his career on staying invisible finally decides to step into the spotlight? Not for glory, but to pull the rug out from under the most powerful executive in the building. It started on a Tuesday night, late, the kind of time when the city's downtown is little more than empty intersections and the echo of your own footsteps on wet pavement. The Alder and Grant manufacturing building sat quiet, a black glass monolith with only a few stubborn lights still burning. On the second floor, finance wing, I sat alone at my desk. No music, no chatter, just the low whir of the HVAC and the slow tick of rain against the windows. I wasn't working late for overtime or ambition. I was working late because something wasn't right. On my monitor was an invoice. $1.4 million to a consulting group I'd never heard of. The descriptions were vague to the point of meaningless. Operational optimization and strategic realignment. The signature at the bottom was sharp and confident. Victor Harlan, Chief Operations Officer, my boss's boss. Most people in my position would scroll past it, file it away, tell themselves it wasn't their problem. But most people don't have my problem. I can't let things go once I've smelled the rot. And that night, in that quiet, I knew I'd just stepped onto a road I couldn't turn back from. I printed the invoice, slid it into the inside pocket of my briefcase alongside a small black thumb drive. I locked my screen and stood, listening to the building breathe around me. The vents, the faint elevator cables humming somewhere above, the rain working the windows in patient taps. I left the lights off when I walked out. It felt wrong to give the room anything more than darkness. By the time I reached the parking garage, the rain had thinned to a mist. I sat in my car, engine silent, hands on the wheel. I didn't start it, didn't drive. I just sat there and watched the concrete pillars fade into shadow, thinking about the small things that get you noticed in places like ours. One wrong email, one careless question, one invoice you shouldn't have printed. I went home and didn't sleep. Wednesday morning at 8:07, I got the calendar invite. 10-minute sync, Harlan. No agenda, no context. The kind of summons that isn't a request. His office was on 4, where the glass was thicker and the carpet swallowed your footsteps. I knocked. He didn't say, "Come in." He just looked up when I entered, the way a hawk might acknowledge the presence of a smaller bird. "Evan," he said, soft like the start of a lullaby. "Sit." I sat. He didn't look at the invoice on his desk. He looked at me. "You were in the vendor portal at 21:43 last night." "Yes." "This is routine?" "It's my job," I said. He smiled too wide, a smile full of teeth and no warmth. "Your job is to process what's approved, not to go hunting for complications." "Complications?" I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. He tapped the invoice with one manicured finger. "Sometimes we pay for expertise that doesn't come with a public label. I'm sure you understand." I didn't respond, not because I agreed, but because I was counting my heartbeats. Slow, steady. Calm as a shield if you hold it tight enough. He leaned back, folding his hands. "We value your diligence," he said, "but we value discretion more. Let's not make routine become disruptive, The meeting ended the way an elevator ride ends, abruptly, and with the faintest sigh. I left without the paper, but I already had my copy. The freeze-out started quietly. My expense report took 21 days to process. I was removed from a procurement review I'd led for 7 years. It accidentally migrated my inbox to a lower storage tier, and emails started taking an hour to arrive. None of it was enough to prove retaliation. All of it was enough to feel it. So I adjusted. I stopped using my work laptop for notes. I wrote by hand. I made carbon copies. I saved every approval chain. I didn't talk to anyone I didn't have to, and I smiled as much as I could stand to, which wasn't much. On Friday night, I sat in my car with the thumb drive in my palm. I called a number I hadn't dialed in 2 years. The voice on the other end answered on the second ring, calm and clipped. "Carter." "It's Evan Grant," I said. "We met during the Tillery audit. I have something. How serious? He asked. I looked at the thumb drive. 7 figures and a paper trail guided by someone who doesn't expect to be questioned. Don't email it, Carter said. Don't text. Can you meet Monday, 1800? Yes. He gave me an address. Ended the call without goodbye. I slid the drive back into the lining of my briefcase, where I'd stitched a narrow pocket months ago for reasons I couldn't explain at the time. Maybe I'd been waiting for Tuesday night without knowing it. The conference room was rented under a generic LLC with no signage. 2 men, 1 woman. Carter was the one who did most of the talking. He had a pen he never clicked, and a way of filling silence, like it was an instrument. He asked me questions about dates, signatures, deviations from normal protocol. He didn't ask me what I thought of Victor or whether I felt scared. He asked me for facts. I gave him what I had, the drive, photocopies, a notebook where I'd written times in the margins because computers had a way of forgetting. When I finished, Carter nodded once. We'll be in touch. I took the elevator down alone, watching the numbers blink. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I wondered whether I'd still have a job by the time he called. For a while, I did. In the weeks that followed, the company tried to put me back together in the least human way possible. HR sent a friendly reminder about appropriate channels for concerns. My manager offered me a spot on a committee that didn't matter. Victor passed me in the hall and said, "Morning," like we hadn't sat across from each other while he told me to stay invisible. One afternoon, I noticed a new plant in the lobby, something green and glossy that reached up toward the skylight, and thought of how well certain things learn to thrive under glass. On the 3rd Thursday after the meeting, my phone buzzed at 6:41 a.m. "This is Carter. We executed subpoenas last night." I stared at the ceiling. At his house? "At 3 places," he said. "We'll inform the board before lunch." I hung up and stared at the clock until it moved again. At 11:32, my inbox pinged with a company-wide email from the CEO. Effective immediately, Chief Operations Officer Victor Harlan is on leave pending an internal review. The hallway went silent in the way a forest goes silent when a predator steps out of view. People whispered with their eyes. Doors stayed half closed. I ate my sandwich at my desk and didn't taste any of it. 3 days later, another email. Effective immediately, Mr. Harlan is no longer with Alder and Grant. No reasons. No thank you. A clean cut. I wish I could tell you that made me happy. It made me breathe. That's different. But endings are rarely endings. They're doors with more hallway behind them. A week after the termination, I was asked to meet in the boardroom. Not the one we saw during quarterly briefings. The real one, with chairs that grip your shoulders and a table that could double as a runway. The general counsel sat near the head. The CEO sat at the head. 2 board members whose names I knew, but faces I'd never seen in person, filled the far side. "Mr. Grant," the CEO said, not unkindly, "we're conducting an internal review. We will ask you a series of questions. You are not a target of this investigation." An HR liaison slid a recorder closer to me. The red light looked like an eye. They asked about processes and patterns, who had access to the approval queue, whether deviations were documented. They asked whether anyone had pressured me to change records. "Yes," I said once. They asked who. I said his name. They didn't react. The red light blinked without apology. When it was over, the CEO folded his hands. "Thank you," he said. "Your diligence helped us correct a serious issue." I walked out into a hallway that smelled like lemon cleaner and nothing else. At the end, the window showed me a square of sky the color of dull steel. I thought about my father, who welded frames for 30 years without anyone ever saying thank you, except me and my mother and the dog, who wagged when he came home. I thought about how integrity has a sound, not applause, not fireworks, but the quiet click of a lock that finally turns. The prosecutors called 2 weeks later. Carter again. "We're moving forward," he said. wire fraud, conspiracy, will likely need you at the hearing. I'm not looking for a spotlight, I said. You won't get one, he replied, but you will get a record. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. I wore my one good suit. The courtroom wasn't like in the movies. No mahogany, no brass. It had beige walls and flaked paint near the back door. But there was a gravity in the way the judge slid her glasses on and said the case name that made the room feel heavier than concrete. I didn't testify that day. I watched from the back while the government laid out their opening notes. I saw Victor in a gray suit that made him look smaller and younger. His jaw was tight. He didn't look left or right. He stared at the table and kept staring. When it was over, I left through a side door into a hallway that smelled like old paper. Outside, the wind cut down the street in thin, knifing lines, and I realized my hands were shaking not from fear, but from the release of it. Carter caught me at the curb. You did the hard part already, he said. The rest is just process. Process, I repeated, and almost smiled. Back at the office, no one asked me for details, not out loud. People offered coffee they didn't expect me to accept. I did sometimes. I went to meetings again. I stopped being left off invites. The plant in the lobby grew another glossy handful of leaves. Policies changed. Vendor approvals required 2 signatures at or above my level, not 1. Compliance now sat on every major purchase over $250,000. We got training modules that didn't feel like punishment so much as a mirror held at a useful angle. One afternoon, the head of HR surprised me by stopping at my desk. Evan, she said, we're putting together a session for new hires on ethical decision-making. Would you speak? About what? I asked. About what you did. I thought about the recording light, the invoices, the elevator numbers blinking down like a countdown. Okay, I said, but I won't be a hero in it. She smiled like she'd expected that answer. Good, she said. We don't need heroes. We need adults. The session was on a Monday at 9 a.m. 30 people, some fresh out of school, some making second starts. I stood in front of them with a printed handout that didn't have my name on it, only bullet points about procedure. How many of you think doing the right thing will always make you popular? I asked. A couple of tentative smiles. No hands. You're right, I said. Sometimes doing the right thing makes you invisible. Sometimes it makes you an inconvenience. Sometimes it makes you a target. I let the silence stretch until I could feel them paying attention. I'm not going to tell you to be brave, I said. I'm going to tell you to be meticulous, document everything, know your processes. When your instincts whisper, check the math. And when you have to choose between comfort and clarity, pick clarity. You can sleep through discomfort. You can't sleep through doubt. A woman in the back raised her hand. Were you scared? She asked. Yes, I said. Every day. How'd you do it anyway? I asked myself who I was when no one's watching, I said. Then I acted like that person. They didn't clap. I don't think they were supposed to. But no one looked at their phones, and when it was over, 2 of them waited to ask questions about procedures, not people. That felt right. The last time I saw Victor was on a local news clip that played silently in the break room, the closed captioning marching across the bottom of the screen. He was walking up courthouse steps, tie straight, eyes on the middle distance like he could will the air to hold him up. Someone on the floor turned the volume down all the way and left the room. I finished my sandwich and rinsed my hands. The plant in the lobby touched the skylight now. I considered telling someone it needed pruning, then didn't. It had earned its reach. That evening, I left the building at 7:11 p.m. Not late, not early. The rain had started again, a fine, deliberate drizzle that stitched the city together in thin, bright threads. I stood under the overhang for a minute longer than necessary, listening to it. What happens when a man who built his career on staying invisible steps out? He doesn't become famous. He doesn't get a parade. He goes back to work. He signs the forms. He answers emails. he sleeps a little better. And every time a new invoice lands in his queue with language that smells like rot, he remembers the Tuesday night when the building was quiet and the sky pressed low against the glass, and the only sound was rain, and he chooses, again, to be the person he said he was when no one was watching.